Welcome, heroes and villains of Fjook Enterprises YouTube channel, and welcome to Season 3 of Conversations with Fjook. As I decided to start this year off not with how I finished the year with Conversations with GMs, but with the conversation with a web developer I know that also happens to be an indie game developer who all the indie games have been for charity, but I'll let them introduce themselves instead of me rambling on and on.
Hi, I'm Becky Rose, and yes, I write computer games. It's a thing. I guess really I've always kind of made games even before I knew how to make computer games. So it's just a part of a part of life. Make games, have fun.
So the game we're talking about today is Prize Fighter, which why don't you go into the history of that?
Okay, so I suppose, well, if I go right back to conception, I remember walking into my partner's studio and they were watching a Twitch stream. And I don't know if you've ever seen the game, but there's this audience game on Twitch called Marbles. And everyone who watches the stream has a marble drop down this sort of assault course. And they're just assigned a marble, and if their marble gets to the bottom first, they win. And then streamers will sort of commentate on these marble races. And I kind of walked in and I saw him doing this, and prior to this, and what really kind of sets the frame for how this conversation happened is my partner and I run a charity convention for role-playing games every year called Complus. And this was just after we'd done it for the first time. And during Complus, we have a lot of prizes to give away. I mean, we actually did a couple of years ago the biggest giveaway of RPG prizes in 24 hours in history. I mean, it's over 500 prizes, nearly 600. And like in individual items, probably way more than 600. So what we've done at that first convention is we dropped dice into a dice tower and we had people type in chat a number. And if the number came up, the last person to type that number would win the prize. And that was fine, but it had some issues in how it worked. Firstly, dice towers are noisy. Secondly, whilst it was great, like we wanted a system that encouraged people to chat. And it's great that it kind of gamified that mechanism so people were engaging in chat. But unfortunately, it took away from any real conversation, because if people were having a conversation, all of a sudden, the conversation would just be filled with these numbers being typed. And so I see Jason playing this marble game, and we have this conversation, and I'm not sure actually who had the first spark or for using this for Complus. He says it was him, and it might have been. But what happened next is I said, but I could do something more on brand, like have gladiators fighting each other in a dungeon. And so I kind of wrote it. The prototype was written in 2 weekends. And I can show you that. I have footage. I don't know if it's possible to, because you're seeing the half-width screen here of me. I don't know how much this will show, but this is the prototype here, and when I look back at it now, we actually used this at Complus 2, and you're actually going to see a battle that actually took place during Complus 2 using this system. And I mean, I look back at it now. I mean, it's good that it got written in 2 weekends, but it's also really bad. The quality of the background of this dungeon environment is really low, and the metal doesn't shine. And so that was, well, this is basically what I produced after a couple of weeks. And what people would do is they'd be able to upgrade their gladiator. So we have 5 tiers of gladiator. They make a donation to charity, and their gladiator would go up a tier. If they won a prize, the gladiator would go down a tier. And then they could buy potions to increase their chance of winning. Oh, and this was the arena champion. I miss this guy. I want to bring him back. So during every fight, the arena champion would come out. And if the arena champion won, it would represent the kids that we were raising money for, because the project we support is a role-playing related project. So, and it's kids in Africa, basically have nothing, but they're nerds and they're wonderful kids. So I thought, well, they should win some prizes too. So I put this champion in, comes out every fight, and kind of mixes up the result. It looks like he might win this one, actually. So yeah, he's going for it. He got named Tony the Tiger during the stream. I'm not sure if that was the audience or Lloyd, who was one of our commentators. He's having a good go at it, but his Sheep Guevara is trying to stop him. Victory to Sheep Guevara, apparently. So that was, oh my word, that just cut to old footage, and Jason looks very young there. So that was the prototype, and and I look back to that and compare it to where we're at now. We've got this wonderful Colosseum. So after that proved really popular at Com+2. So I thought, for Com+3, I need to do a proper job, and so I went back to the drawing board and I produced this, and I've got some more footage here. So this is from Com+3. And this particular fight is actually the first time a dragon came out during the course of the convention. It's a complete surprise to everyone. But I put a lot more effort into it. So you can actually sort of see things happening between fights now, which I felt was a very important detail. So gladiators leaving the arena, gladiators joining. This is gladiator that won the previous fight. So he gives a salute up on a podium. And look, the metal is now shiny. But even now, I look back at this, there's no shadows, there's no dust in the arena, which is one of the things I added quite recently. And the blood is kind of luminous and glows. And then what's going to happen then? Yeah, all of a sudden the gladiators start panicking, and you'll see the wing fly past in just a moment. Here it comes. There we go. The wing flies past. And then people in the chat will very soon react to this and start swearing. And a dragon turns up. So I put a lot more effort into this one, and it was about, originally, again, it only took me a couple of weekends to sort of get the basic game in, but then we had a bit of a panic really for Com+3, because Com+3 was an emergency fundraiser. It was like lockdown had struck, and there were some real problems that the kids were facing that we wanted to try and help them through by raising some money. So we decided to hold Com+3 ahead of when we'd normally hold it during lockdown. So I had a couple of weeks where I'd been furloughed from work, so I could sort of focus on getting this sort of ready and really kind of going to town with it. And I think, if furlough hadn't have happened, it would have been a much more basic game compared to what you see here. But even that, compared to now, where we've got particles and shadows and stuff. So there we go. The dragon has won. But I've got it going slow motion behind me now with one of the new monsters that I added recently, some goblins. But you just see the difference now when they walk. And if I duck out the way, but when they walk, they kick up sand, and the lighting's a lot better, and the enhancements that have happened since Com+3 are quite substantial.
So I don't know if you're aware of this, but I found your channel like a month or two before the first con that you did. And I didn't really participate in the chat or stay long enough in the chat for the first con to win any prizes. But I believe the first con was for child play in England somewhere, which is a very good, don't get me wrong, child play is a very good charity, but the one you're currently doing is even is even more important because not enough people know about it. So what is the charity that Con Plus 2 and Plus 3 raised money for?
Well, I can talk a little bit as well about the time we did it for Child's Play as well. It wasn't specifically Child's Play in Britain. It was Child's Play, which is an international charity, but 95% of the money Child's Play raises goes to America. And specifically, what they do is they put games and toys into hospitals for children. And to be honest, it wasn't that I didn't want to support Child's Play. I wish them all the best. But when we did that first convention, we'd inherited this convention called Brigade Con, which had always supported Child's Play. And so the first year we took it over, we wanted to provide some continuity. And so we supported Child's Play, but we were on the lookout for something better. The thing about Child's Play is they raise something like 125 million a year. But so that they're a massive charity. They didn't need the couple of grand that we could raise, particularly. But but because it was so focused, or their spending was so focused on America, we felt very strongly that we wanted something that had a more global appeal. And it's kind of ironic, really, because we've ended up with a charity that's not really global at all, but it is important in a global sense. And it began just before the first convention, about 2 weeks before. I saw this post on a board gaming group of these kids in Africa playing a game called Twilight Imperium, which, if you know board games at all, Twilight Imperium is kind of known as the daddy of all board games. It's this big, complex game. And they were playing the 3rd edition as well, which is an older, more complex edition. And they were loving it. These kids from, I didn't know what it was then, but a city called Kampala, which is the capital of Uganda. And they were playing Twilight Imperium version 3rd edition, and I love Twilight Imperium as a board game. I think it's a great game, and it's one of those things that you can kind of get out as an event for your friend group, and people will travel a long way from amongst my friends to come and play in our Twilight Imperium games. At least they could before the dreaded virus hit. So I commented on the picture and just ended up in a conversation with the guy who'd posted it. Turned out that he ran this school in Uganda for disadvantaged children. And Uganda is a country that has a lot of issues with poverty. I mean, 80% of the population dies before age 30. They have a real issue in really 2 key areas. The villages in the north of Uganda are very remote, and also they have slums in the cities, and the people there are extremely poor in what is already one of the world's poorest countries. They are the poor amongst the poor. And what this guy had done is he'd set up this school because he wanted to bring about change, and he has this sort of philosophy of making change makers. But what he wanted to do was he wanted to tackle it with the children rather than adults. And a lot of the the NGOs and other charity work is sort of focused around improving Uganda generally. But he said, I want to take the children and, well, not take them, but train them in how to bring about change in their communities, and then support them in doing that. That's how it started. And so he gets the children from the slums and from these remote villages, and he trains them in social entrepreneurship, he calls it. So this sort of process of bringing about sort of deep and meaningful change within communities. And then once they've had an education, they get an education too. But once they've had that education, the project then supports them in setting up whatever things they want to do within the community. I mean, part of the program he does is they have to do something in their community to help it. And that can be anything. It's based on what the child wants to do. But what really struck home about this charity was that because it was a boarding school, the kids would stay on after the day school was over, And then he needed to entertain them. So he used originally board games, as a way of sort of continuing their education into the evening whilst also giving them, fun. But then one day he tried a role-playing game and they loved it. And a lot of these kids, I mean, it's a big school, but, a lot of these kids are role players and board game nerds like us, which is amazing. They're into Pathfinder and they're into 5th edition and they're into, all sorts of odd different role-playing games and stuff. And over the years, I've got to send them various different sort of different systems that they've tried and so on. And they really are fantastic nerds, but they're from, as I say, the poorest parts of one of the world's poorest countries. And I just felt that we could, because it was a small charity as well, we could make a really big difference to them. And it turns out that so far, the 2 conventions that we've done to raise money for them, and we've raised in total now over £9,000. Yay for the Dragon Ball Z meme. But with the 2 conventions we've done, both times it has actually kept the doors open on the charity, because the first time we didn't actually know at the time, but the charity was facing a bit of a funding crisis because Brexit had just happened and the exchange rates had messed them up, because the charity is registered in the UK. Most of its fundraising is from the UK. And the exchange rates at the time were really, really bad. And it had caused a cash flow problem. And that's when the convention was. So it really did help them keep the doors open. But then the second time in lockdown, the charity was genuinely facing closure, which is why we decided to do it, because all of their normal fundraising sources had dried up. All their budgeting had just gone out the window with the lockdown. And worse than that, the children local to the centres, many of them not even on the project, just children in that area, because they're in a very poor area, were starving with the lockdown, because the travel restrictions in Uganda meant that you couldn't, people couldn't work. And a lot of those families live each day with the money they earn that day. So people, there was a genuine famine brewing in Uganda at that point in time, because it doesn't have, as a country, it doesn't have the social safety nets that we have in the West. I was furloughed. My company didn't have to pay me. The government paid my wages to the company, and then the company paid me. That's it was the furlough system we had in the UK. But lockdown in Uganda meant something very different entirely. It meant starvation. I mean, it saved a lot of lives, having the lockdown. And, you look back on the year we've just had in Uganda, they actually had more deaths from malaria than COVID. But at the same time, the impact on the poorest people in Uganda was extremely profound. And the charity was facing closure. So we decided to bring Com+3 earlier and sort of host it as an emergency fundraising thing. And we broke our target. We hoped to raise £3,000. We ended up raising nearer 4 on the night. And because we always raise a bit of money just after as well. So it's hard to say exactly what was raised at any given time. And then, as I say, by year end, we'd brought our total from both years combined to over 9,000, and we actually hit that on New Year's Eve at the end of last year. So yeah, it's not only saved the charity, but some of the kids, because basically, I should miss this bit, it's important. 5 of the kids stayed at the centre during lockdown, because that was the most that they were allowed to have in one place. So most of the kids had to go home, but these 5 kids stayed on. And what they did is they were feeding the local children. So they would, and also taking around essential supplies to some of the poorest families as well. Things like cooking oil and charcoal and stuff to make a basic meal, and sugar and things like that. So they were delivering out to the families in the poorest to provide food. But also some of the starving children were coming to the centre, and they were, all throughout lockdown, they were able to provide meals for 30 children. And then after the convention, they were able to extend that to a few more as well, because we broke our fundraising target. I would say I like to think, but I'd just been to the AGM of the charity a couple of weeks ago, and they said it themselves, and it was like a lot of kids are alive today because of that convention. So personally, I'm very proud of that, because it made a huge difference to over 30 families, and did directly save lives. And we could do that as part of this convention with this game, with this weird, quirky, not quite fantasy, not quite Roman gladiators game.
That's a very good segue back into the game. So first off, can you still play the game even if you're completely broke?
Yes, yeah. So what we do now, I mean, aside from the convention, which we still plan to have Complus 4 at the end of this year, but what we do now is every week I stream on a Thursday night at 8 p.m. UK time for about 2 hours. And at Christmas, I did a couple on the Saturday as well, because I know that time of day doesn't necessarily work for people in America. But sorry, I'm not in America. My timing is therefore, it happens on a Thursday night. Excuse me. And we play now on Twitch rather than YouTube. So I set it up on Twitch because we've been let down by YouTube in the past, technically. So I set it up on Twitch, the address at the top of the screen, twitch.tv/prizefightertv. And you can play every Thursday. And yeah, you don't have to pay money to charity to play the game at all. You get money every time you kill somebody in the arena. You get 75 denarii to spend on equipment and such. And you actually don't need to spend money on equipment. You can just use the experience that your gladiator owns, because that's actually technically does more than the equipment does. So anyone can win in the arena. But yes, players like to sort of equip different items and sort of boost their stats with different items. There's as well as a magic item forge where you can create items yourself, there are over 600 items in the game. Most of them, well, all of them have unique visuals in some way, although a couple of them are color swaps. But yeah, if you make a donation to charity, I'll give you in-game currency. But you also earn it in the arena. So every kill is 75 denarii. Winning a prize fight, you can get 300, 600, or 900 denarii. There's even a mode called Ultima Ludi, where you can actually win 1,800 denarii in a single fight. And when you consider that 1,800 denarii will buy some of the more expensive things in the game, so in just a single arena bout, you can win that kind of money. So yeah, it's entirely playable without donating to charity. But of course, I'd love it if you did. But the way it's been designed, it's set up the people. I think most of the regular players will have made a donation or two when they first sort of started playing to sort of accelerate their progress, and then they'll make the occasional donation because there's a few of the epic things that require a bit of denarii. Which I did deliberately so that the regular players would have some reason to donate, again, if they choose to. So, but it's not an expensive game to play if you want to. But it's the old argument with games, isn't it, about paying to win? And you don't need to pay to win with Prize Fighter, but you can accelerate your progress by making a donation to charity. Is how I've done it.
Didn't I win at one of the conventions as the lowest stage you could get?
I remember at Complus 2, somebody, and it may have been yourself, it might have been Chav Hunter, managed to unlock what we called the donkey. So at Complus 2, there were 5 tiers. So tier 5 was sort of super epic with spiky armor. Tier 4 had lots of sort of metal armor. Tier 3 was kind of leather armor. Tier 2 you looked like a peasant. tier 1, we had various different monsters, and you could just be random things like a basilisk or a snake, or there was one that was meant to be the goblins that you saw in the background earlier, but for some reason the graphics didn't work on the night, and so we called it the Invisible Man. Because you were just invisible for some reason. And there were various other monsters, but if you won with one of the monsters, you went down to what we called tier 0, which was a donkey. Now, a donkey never won a fight, but they were appalling. I think if you ran 1 million fights, you'd still be. I would be quite surprised to see a donkey win, although technically no reason why they couldn't, other than their appalling stats. At Com Plus 3, we didn't have the donkey or the monsters. We had just gear. So you end up at the lowest tier with a pallet and a wooden stick to hit people with. A pallet as a shield. And then all the monsters were things in the arena that you had to defeat. They represented the children at Com Plus 3. So I imagine that somebody may have won with just a pallet shield and what we call the breadstick at some point. And maybe you did. I couldn't honestly say with that one.
So you've obviously increased the amount of You've introduced dragons and annex for the project, the charity to be. What's the list of? Do you have a list of the monsters that the charity can be at this point?
Oh, well, you've asked an interesting question, because it's actually what I'm currently working on is expanding the list. So I'll tell you what I have now. If I'm just pulling up the code to have a look at the list. So let me just find the right file. Okay, so at the moment, they could be a kudu, which is a type of antelope or deer. There could be a wildebeest. There can be a rhino, a tiger, a scorpion. And that's kind of the end of the animals. Now we move on to the sort of fantasy creatures. So you can be an ankheg, which are wonderful. Oh, there's some in the background. They're lying on the floor. They're dead. So the ankhegs kind of burrow under the ground and then sort of erupt out in this sort of cloud of dust and then sort of attack you from beneath your feet. You could be, or they could be a hydra. We have what we call the public domain eyeball monster, because the thing we would normally refer to it by is trademarked by somebody. We have various colours of Memphit: fire Memphit, poison Memphit, lightning Memphit. We've got wyverns, a red dragon, 4 blue dragons. We have ice snakes. That's one of the things. So everything now from Ice Snake onwards is something I've added recently. We've got goblins. We have what we call the Covidiot, which is a fantastic new monster. It's like a little armored leech thing that looks kind of very plaguey. And it comes out, and instead of attacking the gladiators, it goes for the corpses. And it goes through an animation where it raises its tail and opens its mouth in excitement. And then 30 seconds later, that corpse explodes in a shower of blood and another Covidiot pops out. So they can quickly get out of hand if they're not dealt with hard and early. We have a fire demon, which I previewed it last week. I've since perfected it, so it looks a lot better now. We have a giant, 2 of those actually. We have some Amazons. We have some orcs. I'm currently working on an orc shaman that should be ready for next week, I hope. Now, the Orc Shaman is actually, it's a bit of a project, this. It's going to have a very transformative effect on the arena. And of course, everything I say now isn't in for definite, because this is stuff I'm working on. So I have the Orc Shaman to the point where it's technically in, and I could put it in just as it is. It does work. It's a magic using character. But I want to take it a step further. Because it's a shaman, I want it to turn the whole arena into a natural scene with grass and trees and rocks, and what this all just kind of grow as the shaman sort of summons it. And then once the arena's been transformed in that way, if the shaman have been allowed to complete that process before being killed, the arena itself will then start attacking the gladiators. So you have plants that attack the gladiators and mushrooms and whatever else like madness I've come up with. Those are the two I'm planning at the moment. So yeah, that's a current work in progress that I'm hoping will be ready for next week. And there's a few others that sort of that are sitting on the fringes, stuff that I've got partially complete, like models are sort of done and rigged, and I just need to sort out the animations and sort of bring them into to the engine. So I have a basilisk ready to go. I've got a giraffe, which I'm tempted to do many years ago, and it's an in-joke that I think only I will get. But I was writing this MMO, which unfortunately never came to market, but I was writing this MMO that, very generic fantasy MMO type thing. It was all based on Welsh folklore. But interestingly enough, one of the creatures in it was a giraffe for reasons I won't go into. But I made a mistake when I was coding the graphic shader to render this, that renders this giraffe on screen, because I was giving it its fur, but I accidentally typed a value wrong and it had really long fur. And so I put a screenshot up on the sort of page for this game and sort of showed the fans at the time this sort of error screenshot, as it were, and it got dubbed the woolly mammiraff. So I'm tempted to recreate the woolly mammiraff and bring that back in. So maybe that'll happen. There's going to be a lot more human type opponents as well. So from different regions of, like, I was going to bring in some. A kung fu monk is one I'm thinking of bringing in. Some African warriors perhaps might make it. Just got to be, careful how that's presented. There's a number of things that are sort of sitting on my hard drive in various stages of, this could be good. But the thing is, I don't just want to put a monster in. When I add something to the game, when I add a monster, I want it to bring something different and unique. Like the monsters should all play and break with some mechanic in some way. So when I added the Amazons, for instance, one of the things they do is, for the first time for a monster, is after they hit the sand, they may get back up, just like players, because player gladiators can do that. If they have long enough on the deck, they may recover. Well, Amazons do that. So it's the first time we've had a monster doing that. And then with the giants, I went a step further and I thought, well, okay, so we've got this concept now of monsters recovering, not just being killed and then they're done. So with the giants, I thought they've got huge constitutions. How about, even if they survive or, they die in the fight, they'll get back up for the next fight. So you can have a giant or two giants in the arena, and then more monsters come out because the giant's there right from the start. As I say, with the Orc Shaman, the point of the Orc Shaman is to have this transformative effect on the arena. The Orcs aren't particularly special; they're just there to cover the Orc Shaman. But most things that I add now, I want it to have this sort of impact on the game that brings something new and interesting to the mechanics of the game, rather than just having a different graphic with different numbers associated.
I'm not making this argument, but one could make the argument that the monsters cheat.
In what way?
As you said, they break the rules.
Well, they introduce new and interesting mechanics. But sometimes these things will filter back to the players as well. So when I introduced the Wyverns, I gave them this poison cloud attack, and this hasn't happened yet, but I am still very much considering making that a player castable spell. The ice snakes will actually freeze people in ice cubes for a time. So I'm also tempted to make that a player spell as well. So, I might create a mechanic for a monster, but it might still feed back to the players at some point.
Earlier on in this conversation, you mentioned that the best way to do well at this game is to spend your XP if you're not going to pay, if you're not going to donate, to spend your XP to make your gladiator better. What are the options for spending your XP on, and what do they do?
Okay, so the combat mechanics of Prize Fighter are very unique to Prize Fighter. And which incidentally, I am currently playtesting a pen and paper RPG version because I've been working with an author who might well be making it into an actual RPG you can buy in its own right, a pen and paper book RPG. But that's early stages on that. So it's got very unique mechanics that are designed to really drive what I wanted to achieve with the computer game, first of all. So it has an attack speed property, which is how quickly your gladiator will do things. It has an attack and a defend stat, so you can be good. Rather than just being good at combat, you might be a very defensive orientated, or you might be offensively oriented. Similarly, there's a weapon damage and an armor stat, which you can't improve with XP. That is done with equipment, those two. But they're not essential. Although I always say a little bit of armor does go a long way with even if you just get one bit from your winnings. But then you've got your health bars, as it were. So we have stamina, health, mana, and morale. Mana is obviously related to spells. You can buy spells with XP and the mana to cast them with. You can also get that stuff on equipment as well. Stamina is separate to health because your armor will protect your health. And once you're out of health, your gladiator will leave the arena, or they'll die, and at the end of that fight, they'll leave the arena. And they won't come back until a new sequence begins, because each sequence is usually one ladder fight and 3 big arena fights with lots of people. So if you died in the first, in the ladder fight or the first sort of big arena fight, and you ran out of health, your gladiator won't come back. And armor helps a long way with that, as does the health stat. But the key one really for health is actually stamina. Now, I'm thinking about playing with this a little. I might change it and make stamina recover a little quicker. But stamina is what you usually run out of. And so your gladiator hits the deck, but whilst they're on the deck, they're not technically too wounded to continue. So once they've recovered some stamina, depending on how high the morale is, they will get back up and rejoin the fight. So stamina is the health in the normal context of these games, whereas health is sort of like your mortality, if you like. Morale is another key one. So every time a gladiator does something that's good, they gain morale, and every time something bad happens to them, they lose morale. And whilst that kind of doesn't explain it as well as it kind of works out in animation on screen, because what will happen is if the gladiator gets overwhelmed by too many people at once, they'll say, "Oh no, I can't, too much," and they'll lie down. And the rule of the arena is if a gladiator gives up like that, they are not allowed to rejoin that bout, but after the fight they can get back up and take part in the next bout. So morale helps with that. And then, as I say, there's mana, which is just directly for casting spells. It does regenerate over time, but more mana is good. And of course, you can spend XP on actually learning spells, of which there are, I think there's 10 player castable spells, I think, at the moment, and that list will get bigger.
And you're the only one working on this game at this time.
Yes. But right, I'm a programmer and I'm a graphics programmer, so it's great. I can program special effects, but a lot of the models, the characters and the monsters, I have purchased the rights to use them from people who are good at that stuff, because I used to be able to do it, but not to a great standard. So I stopped doing it quite a long time ago. So the character models, they're actually really old now. In fact, it's a bit of a story to this. They'll buy a guy called Steve Finney, who works for Arteria Gaming, and you can still buy some more modern, great up-to-date models from Arteria Gaming to this day. But these models now are long since discontinued. I got them years and years ago. Again, it was for the MMO project I referenced earlier, the one based on Welsh folklore. And the problem with them now is I can't find the original files. I've just got ones I tinkered with to try and make this MMO, and the MMO wasn't it. One of the reasons it never came to market was because it ran into problems with the graphics pipeline. So I've only got these low quality textures, not the original high quality ones. The animations are slightly balked, so I've got these odd twitches in the animation that I will refine that myself at some point. I'll get to that's on my to-do list. But it's most notable when they're holding a bow or riding a horse. Sometimes there's little imperfections in some of the animals that I'm not happy with. Because these are really old, dated models that have been converted from format to format and had quality stripped out and stuff to try and get it to work on this old MMO engine from years ago. Which I can't remember when I was writing that. I think it may have been like 2004, 2005. So like these are 15 odd years old. And the thing is that I commissioned Steve to do special texture sets for this MMO that I still haven't put into Prize Fighter. I still have them. So I want to revisit the hero characters at some point. But I'm tempted to get some of the newer Arteria ones. He does quite a good range of sort of Viking and Celt type stuff, which could work quite well for a fantasy setting. There's a lot of monsters that were by a guy, I don't know his actual name, but he used to trade as 3D Foyne, but I think he sold up and now might now be part of Dexsoft. I'm not 100% sure. There's a couple of Dexsoft monsters in there as well. I'd love to get some of the Protofactor models, but they're really expensive and I can't afford them. But if somebody can give me $800, that would be great. I could do some amazing things with those models. Sorry?
$800 American?
Yeah. I guess like 90 odd models though. I could be adding that stuff for years to come. There's some amazing 3D artists out there, and I realized, as I say, a few years back that this isn't my skill. Although I do want to relearn animation. Like I could animate back in the day, but the problem is because I haven't done 3D modeling myself in so long. I only do stuff these days in code. If it can be made in code, I'll make it. So I no longer know all the modern tools, but I'd like to relearn animation because I do with I have to do quite a lot of work with the animations that are on these models anyway, but I do it using code essentially, or I use this texturing tool called UV Unwrap that has some animation stuff in it. You can't animate, but you can chop animations around with it. So I sometimes use that. So yeah, that's a skill I'd like to get back into, but I don't think you'll see me sort of creating 3D geometry in an art package anytime soon, because I lack the the particular mindset for that, I think.
I think what you have done in introducing traps and all the new monsters is bloody amazing.
Yeah, the traps are fun. I every now and then I do an update. Like I'm constantly adding things to Prize Fighter, but every now and then I do an update that I think, wow, this is a landmark moment, because I now don't want to go back to the earlier version. Like the traps was one of those landmark moments for me. But also, like most recently, even though I added monsters for last week's stream, adding the dust. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to bring this up in the background here. If I put it on normal speed rather than paused, and I'm just going to take manual control of the camera. So if I move this around, you'll see the guys walking, and even when they're walking, they kick up. Oh, well, they've gone straight past the camera. They ran all the way. But they kick up dust. Hopefully you can see that. And it's as each foot hits the ground, they're kicking up dust. And like now, for example, when you fight a dragon, let me spawn a dragon in the background. I'd say that this guy is in for serious amounts of pain very imminently, because in comes the biggest dragon in the game. The dragon kicks up dust. I don't know if we'll be able to see this, because I don't know if this fight will last long enough. But hopefully, where's he gone? Where is he? There he is. So as the dragon flaps his wings down, it actually creates a downdraft which stirs up the dust from the arena. There you go. So you can sort of see it just about there, hopefully. And in the course of a big dragon fight, that can actually be really dramatic. Like you can have these, like especially if you get this sort of camera view of the length of the arena, and you just kind of see these clouds of dust and stuff. It makes such a big impact on the visuals of the game, but also it's made me realize, in terms of role playing, the times that I've put a dragon in and failed to make the environment not just part of the fight, which is something I always say, like as a GM, when you're doing a role playing game, make the environment part of your encounters. But dragons reshape the environment around them. I look at the dust this guy's kicking up. He's caught in a trap at the moment. There's so much smoke on screen, it's hard to see. But like the dust is kicking up at times when it will do it. It can be quite dramatic, and like if you compare, or if you get the chance, sort of go to, we did a dragon fight at the very end of the stream on Thursday. So right up if you're looking at this in the future, it won't be there. But if you go to the URL at the top of my screen now, and then scroll to the end for the dragon fight, and you'll see the dust clouds in that fight are incredible. And you compare that to, this dragon fight from Complus 3. If I just skip this forward a minute or so from where we are, there we go. Oh, and hit play. There is no dust. There's a lot less flame effect. There's no smoke effect. And like in its time, this was cool because it was a dragon. But now the dragon dominates this environment. And I look in the background now. You've got the way it's kicking up the dust, and once that dust is kicked up to the point it's above gladiators' heads, which can happen during takeoff and landing, it looks really dramatic.
That is really cool.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, there are some things, like there's so much stuff on my to-do list, and occasionally, sorry.
It seems like you really care about this project, the game.
Yeah, I mean, like I just recently, I took these have grates over them normally, and I just recently took the grates off to turn them into pit traps, and I don't usually use these fires on the Thursday night streams, but they're for Complus for the night sequences, so I have these fires on, which do cast light and shadows into the arena. But of course, now the fires couldn't sit in the grate, so I put them into the pit traps. So now during the night, your pit traps will become flame pit traps, which it still kills you either way. It's just more awesome to die in fire. yeah, I love doing things like that. And you know, I created this game 2 years ago, about for Complus 2. Well, the prototype, as it were, for Complus 2. And I'm still working on it and doing things to it. And it's, I can't explain it. Like, I have this other game that is due for release Q1. So, you know, anytime between now and March, I said is when I'm going to release it. I originally said Christmas, but I postponed it. I realized I wasn't going to hit that anyway. And to be honest, it's almost finished. It has been for half a year, but I keep coming back and doing things to this because I like it. I like my other game too. It's a sports motorsport management one for endurance racing. So you've got like Le Mans cars. By the time I actually finish that, they will no longer be using sports prototype and GT cars at Le Mans. They'll be using the new hypercars. So I've left it so long. The format of Le Mans has changed, and I still haven't finished that game because I'm going, oh, I've had this idea for Prize Fighter. That would be so cool. The dragon, sorry, the giants are awesome. Let me show you the giants. I'll spawn them in now, and then I'll just cheat them into the middle of the arena. And oh no, where are they? Hang on. Come on. It should be coming. They're on their way. They're on their way. Let me put that back on the normal camera. I love the giants. They're just there we go, back to normal camera. So they're going to turn up in just a moment. And this, as I said, there's two of them. They look different, similar, but actually I've ended up putting I've doubled them up by accident. But here they're just coming into view now. So it's sort of big, muscular guys, and I love their sort of the characterization of their animation, and they kind of stomp around like a dragon. They create lots of, let me duck out the way so you can see them. They create lots of dust as well because obviously they're big, heavy guys. And I love it when they get back up once they've gone down, and they get back up and they kind of scratch their head, and then sort of after a moment they'll go and pick up their big halberd thing. And he's gone down. I'm trying to duck out the way. So hopefully in a moment you'll see him get back up with a bit of luck, and you will see him. Oh, here we go. Look, he's getting back up, and he kind of scratches his head, reaches over for his halberd, and then he's back off again. I love that stuff. It's just adds personality.
Well, I wasn't expecting to go more than half an hour talking with you, but we're already at 52 minutes, so I'm going to end it here.
Okay.
Bringing me back onto the screen. So, twitch.com/prizefighter. Twitch.com/prizefighter.tv and BeckyRose.com to spend your experience.
Yes, so the game, so you actually play the game via the website, so BeckyRose.com. But you watch the game on Twitch, so it's passively played. You do your stuff between the battles, then you watch the battle on Twitch. I am starting to work on games now that have more interactivity during play, but Prize Fighter was always primarily for Comp Plus, so it's all about the stuff between battles, and then once things happen on screen, no skill involved in that deliberately. So you know, it's because it's to win prizes during Comp Plus, but also in the weekly games we just play it for fun, and it is fun. I love it. So thank you very much for having me on.
I will, depending when I wake up, I might see you doing your game today. I might not, but I hope both you and the two people watching, one of them being my best friend Anthony, have a good day.
Hello, Anthony, and do come on Thursday and play Prize Fighter. It's so much fun. You'll love it. Promise.
How do I? There's the end button.
Okay. Bye.